Greetings everybody, welcome to a bird's eye view of my table in a rather stormy evening in New Zealand, and this is the first episode of a series which I'm creating called the Creative Journal series. Not being very versed in making videos, I've decided to do this series as a bit of a warm-up to perhaps some others on different topics. This will be pretty much a show and tell of a few objects and projects of which I've been working on over the last few years. I'm essentially a painter, and there's a bit of a story to this. The process of painting. Several years ago, a tutor while I was at art school mentioned that for him, his system of working went in cycles of 7 years, 7 years of fat and 7 years of lean, as he put it, which is, as it may sound, that for 7 years you produce quite a bit of work, and then for 7 years you don't. And that has actually tended to be how my work has unfolded. Not saying that I'd completely stop, but my work, actual paid work, is creative as well. So often I'm still painting, but in terms of my actual self-creative personal paintings, it fluctuates in that 7 year cycle. So currently I am in year 5 of a lean period, but what I have been doing is other stuff. I have kept myself busy. 2 years ago I bought a whole pile of jewellery equipment and a wire and carving tools and pliers and gemstones, greenstone, which is the one of the names that we here in New Zealand call jade. The Maori name for jade is pounamu. So in this time I've been carving pounamu and a little bit of amethyst, a little bit of shell, mother of pearl shell, black and white. And tonight I intend to show you some wire weaving, which I've been doing. This was a thing that a friend who actually is back living in Texas now showed me an image of, and it was one of the things I quite liked the aesthetic of, and I set about learning. I found a tutorial on YouTube and set about making. I bought some wire from a local supplier, which turned out to not really be the best wire. Now this here is what I made that day, and it took me 8 hours because it was quite slow going, and I was pausing and starting again, and the focus won't be that good when I get in there close, but you can sort of see now it's copper wire, and there's some people may have seen it before, the technique or the aesthetic. Now after doing that, when you look at it that way, to me it looked a little bit like half of a tiki face. Now tiki is a character, an emblem that is made by the Maori. When it's called the hei tiki, that means a tiki that's hung around the neck. And where I see it, bump the camera, there's an eye and there's sort of half of a mouth. You'll see what I mean. It was kind of just a very loose departure point, and it was a challenge to me of like, hey, that sort of looks like a bit of a tiki, and I might have a go at making a tiki and see whether I can do it. So 2 years ago, I set about doing that. And I was working on a job at the time, and so in the evenings and in the weekends I was playing around, and I've got a little frame, it's sort of framed roughly. It's got these things all in stages of what I'm going to do with them, how I'm going to present them. These frames are an idea of perhaps just the way that they'd be boxed up, because they kind of look quite good just hanging on the wall by themselves, or perhaps even this one is here's a jade cobble. It's reasonable, but it's not very good quality. You can probably see the whiteness in the flakes. It serves the purpose. And then, originally I'd been placing it on that, and I've also tried placing it on a piece of wood, and it looks quite nice on a nice piece of rimu, which is a native timber here, from here. But in the last 6 months, the idea has been perhaps a velvet-backed box, sort of reminiscent of a museum or jeweller's box. Should I begin to sell any of these, which if I did, I'd only really plan to make up to 10 of them, because they're quite a bit of a, and they're quite involved. They could make they mess with your head, because the stitching is very convoluted, and this one took me 50 hours. And what we have here is a greenstone tongue, greenstone in the nose. That's actually jadeite, not nephrite jade. And these here are rubies. They're not expensive rubies. They're actually been treated, which means that they've been heated. And I just wonder whether I can see the light to come through them and still get it in shot. I think I just did then, but now it's quite awkward. Getting all working in reverse here, so you can see through the greenstone, and you can see that it's ruby eyes. Now the ruby eyes, or the rubies, they heat them, and that can increase the colour. And then they've also been fissure filled with lead glass, so they may look nice and big and red, but they're actually lower grade. But that's all right. Traditionally, the eyes of the tiki, which is this, of course, the form, some had pawa, which is abalone shell, as a ring. And when the European made contact or came to this country, there was discovered red wax, the sealing wax, and there's a groove in the eye of the jade, because there's often carved in pounamu, and that got filled with red wax. So the reason why I've made them red like that is sort of reminiscent of that thought. And down at the back of it, see, I'm not sure how good this can really be in terms of being able to see the detail. I don't have a macro on this, it's just a GoPro camera. Yeah, so this was the prototype, and since then I've got 4 and one head that I haven't finished, and they all have pointy heads, which is the pointy head is the mountain from my local mountain in Taranaki, where I originally come from. And what I do is it starts with this eye, or the other eye, but I guess because I'm left-handed, I sort of start with the left, and the section. It's hard to do. Everything's a little bit mirrored. That section just behind the nose there, Oh yeah, I'm going to insert a few photos because I've got a photo of this piece, and it's that piece, and then there's 6 wires, and I get to that point and split off 2, and those 2 become this piece, and the other 4 come. Actually, this one's only 3, but the other, each one's different. The other ones change, and then it comes around like that, and then I do the same but in reverse, and they join up. So then the wires that remain on from down here, they come down here and they join up to that. Then I create this little coil here above the lip and thread wires through like cat's whiskers, and all those are then woven. It's taken a while to nut out the best way to do this, and it's definitely best to weave these things in long strands before you bend them. And this one, the head attaches to this point, where all the other ones, they attach through here. It was quite nerve-wracking, wondering how long the wires were to be. I drew the outline on a piece of paper, and then I got a piece of string, and I laid the string on my drawing, and went sort of around here and around here, doing this, it's symmetrical, and then stretched out that piece of string, so I had a rough idea of the meterage or the length. In this particular piece, there was 30 metres of the weaving wire, and about 12 metres of the other wires under the ones that I weave around. And the weaving wire was 30 gauge. It's very quite thin. What I found between this one from a local shop, and all these wires, the wires from this, these wires I bought from an online store in America, because they could supply different half rounds and different gauges and different hardnesses. So these are dead soft, as they call it, and there's medium and there's hard, and this was at least medium, maybe hard. And so that's partly why, apart from it being my first time, that's partly why it took so long, because the hard wire and its thicker gauge, to get it to tighten in nicely and tidily was time consuming, and it's very time consuming, and this is still as well, but with the thinner wire and the softer wire, it's actually more malleable, and it will squeeze into place. What I use, and I'll just walk away and get the tools, several pliers. These ones are the main ones that I get lots of happiness from. There's nylon grips, so I will, once I've got some of this, basically a section like that, now it will take me, because that's only, of course, the wider it gets, the longer it takes, but that would probably be an hour, a little bit, maybe 45 minutes, because it's only 4 wires. But once I've got them, got some on there, I'll push it down, squash it down in this way, and then clamp it down like that, squeeze it so that it gets nice and tidy. There are 2 wires. This is a double stitch, whereas I've done 4 stitches there. Online there's patterns for all different sorts of stitches, but I've sort of got into a habit of mainly doing 2, and so, excuse my dirty painty hands, I've been at work. The principle, if these are 4 wires, is you go around the bottom 2 twice, 4 times or whatever, but I do twice, and then you go between it, and then you go around these 2 twice, and then you get through and up until you get to the top, and then you go round the back, you go step back to the bottom again, and you go, and then repeat and repeat and repeat. So there's that one over there. I'll put that, actually I'll put that there, and hopefully I'm still wearing my work gloves. I have to pull my sleeves up because they were quite tatty. We have this one, which is bigger. This is the biggest one that I've done. Now we've got ruby eyes, sterling silver in there. Hang on, see where we got. It's quite hard to see in this light. The eyebrow is silver, so there's little bit of silver there, a little bit of silver. Bigger ruby eyes, bit of greenstone. I haven't quite got my light set up. Bit of an experiment in terms of a little filming studio. And this piece is another piece of greenstone, and it's a shard. It's like a natural piece that's flaked off. And I've been trying to, like the other one has the tongue is a natural piece, except for there was one slice from it. I got a whole bunch of offcuts from a greenstone supplier or a carver down in the South Island, where most of the New Zealand ponamu comes from, and bought some bags full of all these little offcuts, and amongst it there was some pieces like this, some broken carvings, and they were some of my first pieces that I bought. Some of the first bits of greenstone I bought was in this sort of form. I've since bought quite a few cobbles and slices, of which I've made carvings off. This here's a pointy kind of a tail. Each one of them is different. Now this one took quite a bit of an effort, because the difference in size, as you can see, is quite a bit. And there's 9 wires on each of those arms. So there's through this section here, just only that much is 18, and I wove 18 strands. And these wires that come through here also come down, and they come down here and they split off, join back and join round, so they're actually about 60 centimetres in length. So it's quite easy once you get to the end of that. Comparatively easy. But when you're first starting off and you've got these big long strands of wires waggling around, it got a bit confusing. Then you sort of start cursing a little bit, going, ah! But you've really just brought it upon yourself, so you can't really be too much that way. But what I've come up with as a way to make it easier is to make little marker pen dashes, numbering systems on them as you go through the 9. First one's got 1 dash and then 2 dashes, and at about 4 or 5 I then go back to 1, but I make them wider, so you've got fatter dashes, because it becomes too hard to count even the difference between 6 and 7 when you get up there. But it seems to work. And but yeah, what happened over the 2 years, what I did is I made that first one, and then I made the head of this, and then I made a head of another one which has now got a body, and then I put them down for a while, because that was enough. It can be, the people that I showed these to, they're just like, well, you've got a lot of patience. And it is a bit like that. You have to be in the mood for it, that's for sure. I'll get some of the other ones. I'll put this in a box. It might be alright sitting there. I probably should have the camera zoomed in a bit closer. I've got another frame for them. Let's put that there. They're a little bit dusty, this velvet. It's not it's not the final product. It's just some offcuts that I had around. While I've got this in my hand, this is a head, which is more of a recent one. It's sort of evolved. My technique has evolved. It's still taking the same amount of time, except for they seem to be a bit more complex. So I've sort of, rather than getting faster, I've just got more detail in them. And then in the back here, that's probably going to stay there. That's a piece of mother of pearl shell, which I've managed to source. Some that only came in this kidney shape. And so we have that in this tongue. The tongue, you may be able to see, if I hold it out of the glare, it's quite a milky green colour. Now the name of that is called inanga. The Pounamu have different names for their colour, and so this one is inanga. And there's a bit of a story particularly about inanga. It's not the most prized or most valuable of the selection of colours that can be found in New Zealand, but it links particularly into a legend about greenstone and how it came about. And it's for that it's special, but it's quite common. But it's one of my favourites. I actually like this milky green as opposed to the apple green. I still can't get the yellow right. I mean, sorry, not the yellow. The light to shine through them. I've got a torch somewhere. I might grab one of those. So I'll just get some more. I have a few more. And then my torches. Can't find my better torch. I have a few around. Now, cluttering up the table. I'll put that one there. Now, so we have these two. This is the most recent one, which is unfinished in fact. It's kind of almost embarrassingly at the final stage I abandoned it. This one here was the one that I had made two heads at shortly after that one, and then when I restarted after having set them aside for a while, I made the two bodies and made two heads, and then I set it aside again for a little while, not very long, this is in the last year, and then made the body for this one, but didn't finish it, and then subsequently I haven't done anything like that. Some people quite like them just like that, the loose bits, you know, and I kind of agree, but yeah, maybe one day. The idea at the moment is that these were I just, you know, as I said, I kind of had this idea of from here of this that maybe it looks a little bit like a tiki. You can sort of, if I line it up with the sort of, that's how see, I'm looking at a tablet. I've got this camera extended to a tablet. That's why I'm finding it hard to look, because the camera, I can't see through the camera. Now, yeah, so the idea is that once I make enough, which I figure is 10, then I may exhibit them and sell them. And then probably by that stage I probably would have had enough of them, because it's just a little exercise, and then with the intent of learning how to do this technique to apply to some of the other things, which in later series or episodes of this series I'll show you some of the other things which I do as a little, I guess, my little hobby when I'm not painting. Some things I've been working on for 20 years, little sculptures. Now, what's the term that I call it? Sort of like replicas of artifacts. Some of the things which I've made, and now this is a torch which is not the best, but it's not even. Yes. Oh, now this nose on this one is actually a piece of green bottle glass that's been tumbled and picked up off the beach. When in Taranaki, I walk the beach quite a bit and pick up driftwood and all sorts of stones and things like that. Some of which you can probably see over there. And so this one, I mean, I do quite like the idea of found objects when it comes to this. This fellow has a wire tongue. Because he had a wire tongue, I sort of felt that it was a little bit unfair, only not having any greenstone, so I made him a tiki. So you can see there a tiki wearing a tiki, which is quite a funny little joke to me. A little bit like one of those Russian dolls. And yep, so more of the same. I really like this aesthetic, and so does everybody else. It's sort of been that sort of kept me going on them, because I've started to make a family of tikis. It's got this weird sort of futuristic but ancient kind of aesthetic to it, and I have made a few other objects using this technique, and haven't been making some jewellery, and you know, in the traditional way, because this has been around for many years, 1,000 or 2,000 years. This way of making jewellery, not necessarily in a way where it's an object. You probably could wear these, maybe make them into a brooch or wear them as a necklace, but really they're just an object to hang on the wall. And so we have this one as well, which basically I got to a point where I'm a little bit stuck with it. I'd sort of started to overdo it a little, I thought. Well, in fact, on this head here, I took pieces off. But this is sort of in a state here where, there's some loose bits, which is sort of indicative of some of the stages that they sit at while you're working. They can be like this, it can be confusing in a big nest of wires for quite a while. It's quite a pleasing moment when you get to lock off things, but like here there's a piece that hasn't been finished, dealt with, so you're loathed to cut them off until you're fully finished with them. And because often in the back here there's a tangle, and some of the wires that you'd want to keep, well, you need to keep them there to help tie down other bits. And I don't know, you can sort of tell the colour difference here, so there and here, and sort of smokier. And what I use is a product called liver of sulphur, and it is a sulphur extract, and you buy it in jewellery stores. It blackens metal, so you boil up some water and add this gel to it, and it makes the water all like yellow, and then you drop this in and it'll blacken copper and silver, and then you can polish it back off again. And this here is treated copper. You can sort of see how it's shiny, and it hasn't been affected by it because it's sealed off, and I kind of regret putting this on here. Another reason why I sort of haven't finished it, because it's sort of the intention is that maybe these wires will be made sort of as a belly and will cover that, but then I can't say that I got busy with work, but I put it down and I got busy with other stuff, and will eventually go back to it and finish it, of course. Same with this one. I guess then would be at 5, and I'm halfway. So I don't, if it's taken me 2 years to make 5, it's still going to be another 2 years before I'm finished. And I would hope to think that will happen, but I'm not entirely sure. Time permitting, we'll get to finishing these ones, I presume, and see how we go. Now, I think we're getting up to about half an hour, and I probably hadn't intended just to leave these at half-hour videos. It's maybe even shorter, and so thank you for watching. I hope it's been interesting and of some merit. It's sort of helping me to get used to making videos and talking, hearing my voice, and yeah, I'll put this into the computer and edit it together, and then we'll see about doing the next one, which may be in a week's time. That one could well be some of the carvings that I've been doing. Alright, thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye.
Go to war. It's not easy. The media lie every day. It's not easy. Protect themselves again. It's not easy. When you wanna break free from society, it's not easy. And to move back frown on your individuality. It's not easy. And to you them have no say. It's not easy. Got to push forward every day. Take me to my life, guide me to my day. Spirit clear to me, and the path is clear. Take me to my life, guide me to my day. Spirit, tell